Welcome to the Beyond Divorce Embracing Change podcast. My name is Michael Flores, and I will be your host while we explore the complex journey of divorce with empathy, insight, and practical knowledge. Whether you're contemplating separation, in a divorce, or looking for support post-divorce, our episodes provide expert guidance, stories, and strategies to help you through every step of the process. We are actual therapists, helping clients who sit on our couches every day through their difficulties of divorce. You are not alone. Join us as we delve in and find solutions that give you hope again. We're glad you're here.
This podcast is not intended to replace legal or personal help. This podcast is for informational purposes only.
Welcome back to Beyond Divorce Embracing Change. I'm here with Ariana and I would love to say special guest, and it is special, but she's not a special guest. Ariana actually is one of the therapists here at Brighter Possibilities, and we're excited to have her on a more full-time basis. I'm just stoked that she decided to apply for a position and talk to us about it, and it's just really been an amazing adventure. So we're glad you're here, Ariana. And we're actually going to be doing a really cool topic. There's something you said in a session, and I think you wanted to title this the same way. Can you tell us what that statement was you made?
Yeah, it was not lost in the sauce, and it's interesting because I think for me, this work is the first time that I've truly taken a family approach, and I think my first session I sat in being here, I was with you, and it was a co-parenting session, and it was my first time kind of experiencing, dad was talking, and then mom was talking over dad, and then dad was talking, and I don't think we ever actually got to the question that you had asked about trying to support their child. And I just had to take a pause. And, I think I said, I'm so sorry, I got lost in the sauce there. I'm wondering if y'all could answer Michael's question. I'm curious about how this could help, your daughter. And they kind of just looked at me, and I know
we're supposed to answer his questions.
And I think it was interesting too, because, they had to just stop and pause and realize that they had been talking over each other and more of almost fighting with each other than, originally being there to support the child. And so I think that was just a really interesting experience, and kind of grateful to see, I've come to find out that that's kind of the norm sometimes with some of the parents and the families that we're working.
So just being, when you came in, as you mentioned, you were more of an observer when you first started, and you're not anymore. And we were trying to tell you to jump into the sauce as much as possible, right, and stir it up. Do you suppose it's possible that sometimes these families we work with or the court appointments that we get, do you think that people are sometimes afraid to answer the question because it could mean something different than what they're used to?
I think I'm more wondering if they've never been asked those types of questions before, and so they don't know how to respond. And so I think, sometimes with divorces, as we've seen, there might not be that pretty, and there's a lot of hurt there, and there's a lot of things that parents are, trying to navigate with themselves. And so I think sometimes when you stop them and they stop, trying to defend themselves or make sure that us as the therapist sees them in a certain way, it really unlocks something for them and unlocks a new way of thinking and what their ultimate goal is. Because a lot of times it is supporting kiddos and making sure that they're okay in this whole situation.
I like how you picked up on that so quickly. I mean, so I want to talk a little bit more about you for the listeners in a second, but you made a statement in there where you said, when the parents aren't so concerned about the way the therapist sees them. You said something like that. Have you noticed that you get that sometimes, that parents come in and they want to tell it to you a certain way or act a certain way so that you'll see them in a certain way, or they want to encourage you to see the other person a certain way? Yeah. What did you do when you saw those dynamics in family systems? How did you respond to that?
I think, I remember one parent in particular, they were almost pleading their case, if you will, right? And we're not the judge. We can't make any decisions on, what kiddos do or don't do, or, per the court. And, I asked them, do you trust your child to tell me the truth, to tell us the truth? And the parent was like, of course I trust my children. They're going to advocate for themselves. They're going to do, whatever they need to do. And so I think in that moment, we were able to kind of say, all right, then everything that I need to know will come from your child, because your child is the one that I'm seeing as in counseling. And if you trust them, we should be good to go.
That's awesome how you just you realigned where is the trust, and it's like it's here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then let me start there, right? I love that. So tell us about you. I want the listeners to learn more about just you in general, whatever you feel that would be important for them to know about Ariana.
Yeah, so it's been a really interesting journey, I would say, coming here. And thinking about this question and, how did you end up here? Like, I really do think God put me here. I think that's kind of how everything shook out for me. My biggest things that I like to advocate for is just, equity and access and education and, access to mental health services. And so prior to this, I was working in the K through 16 space in kind of the nonprofit sector, getting resources and alignment for students to get education, access to education, higher education, all of that good stuff, and was doing counseling as a kind of in there as well. But a lot of the things that I was seeing in that also had to do with families and the families that students had to go back to. And, they can be fighting so hard for a different change in the system and trying to go off to college or do all these pieces. But, a lot of the things still fell back on the families. And funny enough, I remember when I was in my master's program and taking classes about family and counseling and couples and all of that good stuff, my initial thought was, I never want to do that. That sounds so hard. I don't want to deal with the parents and all of those pieces. Like, I just want to work with the kids. But when you're working with just the kids, it limits you to the change and the ability that you're able to have for those kids. And, even in the short time that I've been here, I've definitely seen how much more impactful it is in pulling in, parents and really truly understanding what it is that child is having to go back into.
Yeah, systems oriented versus client centered, and there's nothing wrong with being client centered. It's not what I'm saying at all, but you found the power in family systems, and it sounds like we had an impact on that, huh? And drink the Kool-Aid. Yeah. Is there other things about you that you feel would be helpful for the listeners to know? And thank you for sharing your journey, how you got here, and for you to say, I feel like God put me here. I mean, what a blessing for us to feel like we were part of that, to create that for you, and that God would lead you to a place like this. I mean, that's a huge deal. I mean, that makes me feel like, oh, cool. That's what I've always prayed for. I want to be a vessel, for God, and for you to say that's a huge deal. So that's awesome. I've never known that. Actually, that's new for me to hear you say.
Yeah, I think in the positions that I've held and in my career, I've always tried my best to serve people.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about how that was kind of through education and supporting students and all of that good stuff. But I think, recently just have done a lot of reflection, and I love when things kind of line up and you're being introspective and all of that good stuff. And, I did realize, I think for me, that this is how I serve people. This is how I can, show up for my clients, show up for these families, and help guide them in that healing, because that's what they're looking for.
100%. And you've seen the hard that they deal with. And, what I love about you having fresh eyes on these families is your ability to empathize with them is so deep. I've had conversations with therapists who've done this for years, and we do become desensitized because we've heard similar stories, but just different families. And so I constantly have to remind myself that just because it doesn't sound new for me doesn't mean it's extremely impactful to them and where they are. And people don't think that I do that. I had a conversation with a guy, Ariana, and actually it was two parents, and I remember I got them. They just both started bawling on me. And I remember what I told them is, I said, look, I need to say this to you. I will never fully understand what it's like to be in your situation, because I think that you could tell that they were just kind of like, no one gets it. I mean, they both were saying the same thing, just in a different way, but it was, no one gets it. No one understands what we go through, in divorce and family systems issues and stuff. And I remember just took the time to tell them, I will never fully understand it. You know what I mean? I there's no way I could. I don't live the life you have. I don't have that. And I said,
But don't think that I don't think about or have never considered the fact that when I leave work today, I get to go home to my children every day. I get to put them in bed every night. I get to say good morning to them every morning.
Mm-hmm.
And now that you're divorced and you split time with your kids, you don't get to do that every day. Don't think that I don't know that. I can't even imagine the pain you must be in to not get to do the thing that I would take for granted. So just know that I know. And right in that moment, boom, they start crying on me. And it's almost like I got them to start feeling the true and realness of the moment so that they could begin a healing process. Sometimes people they try to avoid the pain so much, they don't let themselves heal. And so then you got to kind of take them back and say, it's okay, I see you, and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can just go, okay, good. And then they can have a real moment. And kids do that too. Don't the kids just sometimes just cry because they just need to? They need to get a cry out, you know?
Yeah. And I think, to your point of sometimes I think it's survival mode. I think it's kind of shutting in, bottling in, holding everything together as much as you can as we go through these transitions that sometimes it is nice to have that space to be able to just kind of let it all out and feel. I had a client the other day and she's experienced catastrophic loss. And for them, they, we're just trying to figure out next steps. How do I do this? How do I do that? How do I get to where I'm okay? I don't know what to do. And I stopped them and I said, how could you know what to do? You've never experienced this before. I've never experienced this before. We're not taught, and we don't grow up in life expecting this catastrophic thing to happen and prepare for it. Like, give yourself some grace.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay. Just, allow yourself to sit in it. Allow yourself to get everything that you need, because
it's okay to not know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And you know how you're going to find out? Because you're going to go through it.
Mm-hmm.
But you're asking me to journey with you there, and I'm happy to do so. And I think them knowing, like, there was a really cool thing that I learned, and I want to ask you about things you've learned, but one of the things I remember learning in my journey was, do you know who Bill O'Hanlon is? You know the name?
I think so. Mm-hmm.
So Bill's, from what I remember from his story, Bill's mentor was Milton Erickson. Okay. I know you know that name.
Mm-hmm.
and Bill trained under Milton, and, Milton passed, and his daughter used to work in Dallas, Betty. I wouldn't say I know Betty, but I've sat in a training with Betty and got to talk to her, and she's wonderful, but she passed away also. And so anyway, Bill O'Hanlon used to say that what he believes good therapy looks like is, I think it's called curling. Have you seen curling in the Olympics, where they throw that thing and you have those people sweeping right in front? Mm. He says good therapists are like those people in front with the broom, right? And so what you're doing is you're guiding them into the target that they're heading into. And the target usually is the goal that they have, right, that they're trying to achieve. And a good therapist knows how to stay right ahead of them and just kind of using the power of question to kind of sweep them along so they guide right into the target. We are not the therapists want to be the discus or whatever that thing is. And man, when I heard that, I was like, that's a cool way to describe what the way we do therapy looks like,
Mm-hmm.
because we're right just a little bit ahead of you, right? We're asking you these alternative questions, like you said, that they don't know how to answer sometimes, mm-hmm. right? And we're just kind of sweeping them along into the target in which they're headed. So that's something I learned when I was a clinician, a young clinician. I thought that's a cool way for me to remember how I can help or how I can serve. What are some things you've learned along the way about serving and working with families that you think would be helpful to them to know and to understand? Well, it's okay if it's not a story.
Well, I don't know necessarily. I mean, I guess this could apply in all regards of life, whether that is, you being a client or a counselor yourself. But I think it's trusting yourself.
Mm.
You've been able to survive this long in life. You've had to have been doing something right. And so sometimes it really is trusting yourself to take that next step, to take that leap, to continue forward with, whatever it is, whatever that thought or that plan it is that you have. I think back to that client that I had mentioned, catastrophic loss. They came back into session and they had said, I've got my mind made up. This is what I'm doing. This is what I plan to do. and I'm doing, and I feel good about it. And then I go and ask people, or then I go and, see what do they think about my plan. And for this person, sometimes, some of the people that they sought advice from, from a good place in their hearts, these are people that care about that person, completely derailed them from their plan and completely made them second guess and all of these things. And this client had spent so much time thinking about all of the things that they needed in life and the way that they were going to move forward and the way that that plan looked. And, it's hard. It is hard. We're social creatures and we want that validation and we want to, connect with our community and make sure we're all on the same page. But also it's being able to trust yourself. If you were able to get there, kind of stay in that conviction.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to describe what therapists learn, is that clients actually hold the key to some of their solutions. We're not always the thing, but they look for the validation in other people, their friends, their family. I wish people could know this based on what you said. Man, you were making my brain run. People are going to tell you and respond to your plan and whatever based on their own frame of reference, not on your frame of reference. So if they can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, they're not going to advise you that your plan has any essence to it because they can't see the light that you see. Does that make sense? So they are going to derail you, and it's going to come off as they're trying to protect you, when really they're protecting what they can't see. Just because, okay, if I told you I'm going to go to the NBA, now you might look at me and go, yeah, how's that going to work for you, Michael? Right? Because you can't see it. But that doesn't mean I can't see it. Does that make sense? And so you might look at me and say, well, what are some things you think that will be challenging that you'll have to overcome to get there? That's what therapists are doing. We're not telling you your plan's stupid, it doesn't work. We're saying, how is that going to work? How will that work? Teach it to me. Right? Like, what will that look like? What hurdles will you have to overcome? What are things you've already overcome that tell you that you can do this? Right? How will you know when you've gotten there? I mean, don't we do that kind of stuff all the time? Isn't that cool? Yeah. So when you said that, I was just sitting here going, it's so true. And then what's fun too is they'll come into therapy and talk to us. Then they'll go talk to their friends about therapy and how it's some of these things. And some people frown on therapy because they're like, oh, what, are you crazy? Something wrong with you? Is that why you're going to therapy? The whole stigma. So it's just, what an interesting point that you made there. So that's great. Other things that you feel like you've learned that would be helpful for the listeners and the viewers to kind of hear from, kind of understand some things that you've developed as you've done this journey.
I think it's also holding curiosity, whether that is in the therapeutic space as a counselor or in your everyday life. I know I was sitting on y'all's session earlier, and I think there was a great quote that has escaped my mind, but the essence being, approaching. If you're not willing to understand somebody, how are they going to, want to understand or open up to you? And I thought I wrote it down, but
you heard something like, ooh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Right. The message was there. But that is so true in so many aspects of life, whether that is, you are at a restaurant and being served, or you're trying to understand, y'all were talking about school, so just so many different things. And when you take that pause and you kind of approach life with that curiosity, it allows you to learn so much more, not only about other people, but also about yourself. And I think it provides you that space to take in, learn, and grow as you're moving forward.
I know that quote. Can I say it?
Please.
When you seek first to understand, then you will be understood. Yes, I think that's what you're talking about. Is that right? Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. It's when we seek to understand another person, we then can be understood. It doesn't always mean the other person will grant us the gift of being understood, but man, do you increase your chances. Because like you said with that one couple, when you said earlier, when you sat in that session with that couple I was working with, and they were just talking over each other. Like you could tell. He ain't hearing her, and she ain't hearing him. You could tell. And then I asked a question. They just diverted from that too. They paid me to watch their show. And you got to watch the show. And you're sitting here going, how is this even helpful? And so what was your term? I'm sorry, I got lost in the sauce. It was just so perfect. But it goes to show you, if one of them said, let me first try to understand. I don't have to agree, but I'm going to try to understand their point of view. The other side may have granted them permission to be understood. Yeah. I thought that's beautiful. Beautiful. So let's talk about advocacy. How do you advocate? Where can you advocate? What does that look like?
So I think pretty spot on with timing and kind of a full circle moment, in the work that I was doing previously and even before coming here, I would see kiddos and would do my best to support the kiddos and whatever they were going through, help them with, coping strategies and helping them to kind of understand how to advocate for themselves. And oftentimes it felt a little hopeless sometimes.
Oh, man.
Because I would hear kids talking about, oh man, my mom, dad, sister, granny, aunt, uncle, whomever that they are living with or going home to, are doing all of these things, or I can work on one of the kids said, like, I'm working on my mental. Like, the kid could work on their mental and feel good in themselves. But as soon as they go back into that situation where, mom might be demeaning or dad might not understand or whatever the case. And so, I would find myself kind of coming back to the same thing. And it felt like we could do everything we could with that child. But, unless we helped and looked at the system and saw those other pieces, it felt, like I said, a little hopeless. And I think, so all of that to say is, one of my very first clients that I was working with, they were having a parent issue is what I have come to now realize was happening. It was a parent issue that was affecting kiddo.
Kid was responding to their system. Exactly.
Exactly. And, kiddo was having to grow up and be the middle person and say one thing to one person and the other thing to the other parent. And, I've seen them again since then. And now that I understand what it looks like to bring in mom, bring in dad, all right, parents, this is what your child is experiencing, and your child is a wonderful person and they are doing their best to survive. How can we make that easier for them? And I think, by looking at a client, looking at a family, looking at a situation in that way, you are able to, I think you talked about noticing patterns in the systems, and y'all talked about before roles that children play in divorce and separation and all of that good stuff. And once you can see that, it's easier to put together the pieces.
Yes.
And I think at that point too, you're able to make more effective change.
Right.
Because now you're talking to the adults, you were talking to the parents, you have more power because the kids don't have the power, right?
That's right.
Or they shouldn't. That's a whole other story. But by getting the adults in the room and speaking with the adults and helping the adults to understand each other ultimately is going to result in, hopefully a better situation for that child. And that child is not going to have to live through all those stressors and things that they've been coming in to see you for.
It's almost like, I feel like you're saying, I advocate for the children by being willing to engage the system.
Exactly. And I think, I've got a couple of counseling friends that I'll come back to, and every time, every day or even every week, when I'm catching up with them, like, oh my gosh, we did this, or I got to go sit in on, a court case, or, oh, I got to, watch what it is to, testify as a counselor. All of these things, again, I said I didn't want to do family counseling. I sure as heck didn't want to do court work because that sounded scary.
Oh, it just keeps scaling up, which is more.
So I guess, you asked about something about me. I like to do things that make me uncomfortable so that I can grow. So that's kind of where, I've been vibing here. But to see that and to understand that as a counselor, even a, younger counselor, it isn't scary.
Right.
Because if you can remember that you are advocating for that child, for that family, you're not the one on trial.
Yeah.
It's for them.
Yeah. The big word they use a lot is best interest. And people have a very different way of defining what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
When we're the neutral state and we say best interest of kid, you're right. We're advocating for the interest of the child in the long run. Short term, this may make sense, whatever that parent may want to have happen. But then when you think big picture, we could be missing something greater. That what parents got to remember is that these kids grow up and they age out, and they're going to have life moments that none of us are going to be part of. I'm for sure not going to be part of. Graduations, marriages, children. And these parents are probably going to want to be part of that. They're going to want to go to the wedding. They're going to want to be at the graduation. They're going to want to be, grandparents. They want to, get the phone call and say, I'm bringing your grandson over and hang out a little bit. I mean, or your granddaughter, or whoever. And there's a way bigger picture than the moment that they're in. And these poor little children are just trying to go, it's almost like these kids are like, how do I preserve my childness in all this?
Exactly.
Yeah. And it makes me sad because sometimes these children grow up and have to re-experience being a child as an adult. And it's not as easy to do that, is it? Because part of growing up is responsibility, but you don't want the responsibility because you were responsible when you were a kid. And you know how I can tell when parents, this is something I've learned that I can tell, is when the parents come in and they're super complimentary of their super mature child, they always think my kid's older than what they should be. That kid's actually gatekeeping and probably doing things, or parentified in some way. That kid's probably doing parental things and having to mature faster because there's something not going well in the system you've created for them because they can't be a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it. My daughter, my oldest daughter, she loves being a parent. And I have to tell her, I told her just last night, Ariana, I told her last night, I said, thank you, I'll take this one. Like, almost like, I don't want to, she's just trying to be helpful, I know. But boy, does she want to, don't say that to Dad. Why don't you just give Dad the, and I'm like, hey, kiddo, I'm Dad. I'll take care of it. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to do it lightly, but yeah, give your kids permission to be kids. And so what I love that you said was, here you were growing as a therapist. You're going, ooh, I don't want to do family work. I definitely don't want to do court. And here you are doing family work and going to court. And then you said, it felt like God sent you here. Do you think that happens to people? Do you think people run away from what God actually designed them to do? You think it's common?
I think so, because it's scary.
Uh-huh.
It's scary to do something new and take that leap of faith and trust that it'll work out.
Kind of reminds you of Jonah in the well, doesn't it? It's like Jonah kept running. Swell swallows him up, spits him out, and goes, can't run, stay. I don't know if God... I really don't want God to let a well swallow me up to figure this out, but I will say I hope that God can continue to touch my heart and give me the courage to make the decision he wants me to make. Because the truth is, my humanness is afraid. And I know that Jesus has told us how many times to not be afraid. I mean, tons of times. People want to go read the gospel and read the 4 books of Jesus and just look at how many times he said not to be afraid. It's tons. And here we are, we lead with it. And I know it was scary for you to work with families. And here you are talking about how you can advocate now. I mean, look at what you've done. Look at the growth you've had just in your own learning. So I'm happy that you saw it. I have a weird question. Do you feel like it was a convincing thing? Did we convince you in some way that, you got to engage systems, you have to do this? Did you feel that way, or was it one of those as you began to see it and did it unravel for you? I just guess kind of walk me through that.
I've always loved puzzles and solving things. And I think as I was able to sit on some sessions and then have even sessions of my own, it was noticing those patterns.
Yes.
And seeing and understanding if kiddo is saying this or showing up in this way, and then you meet the parent or the parents, you start to notice most likely what has happened and why kiddo is showing up this way.
That's right.
And so I think it was the exposure, getting the exposure to that. Like, y'all didn't brainwash me or anything like that. I think it definitely...
We don't do that. I mean, we really don't. People think we do. Like, oh my gosh, we're going to manipulate. No, we're not. We are going to guide, and we're going to ask you some really hard questions. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah, so I think it was just
prepared.
the exposure to that, getting to see, change, reframe for myself what is going on there, and you just start noticing it, and you start seeing the patterns, and you start understanding, okay, if I recognize this pattern and this might be what's happening with this family, how do I help ask those questions? How do I help kind of guide them towards, that healing?
Well, you've learned something very soon and very quick. It took me a little while to figure out, but all behavior has purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is just a matter of, like you said, it's a puzzle. It's understanding what the behavior may mean. And like I used to say, I've said this many times on this podcast, but and this is a Dr. Rosgita thing, flirt with the assumption, don't marry it. you marry assumptions, you get yourself you can cook yourself, right there and put yourself in a bad spot. Flirting with an assumption is asking about what you think you see. Doesn't mean you're right. That's why you ask. That's why curiosity, one of the things you said, is so important. Remember the old term, curiosity kills the cat? Remember that term?
Mm-hmm.
And then I made a joke about that once. I was actually writing. I think I'm going to write it. I'm going to put it in a book. But I said, curiosity kills the cat. But maybe that's why the cat has 9 lives. Because maybe in their own curiosity, they found out a way to have 9 lives.
That's interesting.
Isn't it funny? Because don't they say the same thing? Cats have 9 lives?
Mm-hmm.
Curiosity killed the cat. Well, maybe the curiosity is how they got 9 lives. Because if it kills the cat, it's got 8 more chances. So be curious.
So it sounds like they're not afraid to take that leap.
Ooh, well, I don't know. I'm not around cats enough.
Right.
You might be. Are cats afraid or not?
Oh, I don't know. I think they have a mind of their own.
They do, don't they? They are such an independent feline, I tell you, the cats. They are just independent beings. It's pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Oriana, what else should we know? What else would you like to share with our listeners before we wrap this up?
I think, as I've seen new clients and even gone to therapy and counseling and all of those things myself, I think it's not being afraid to ask for that help, not being afraid to try. I think my clients think it's funny when they come into me, because one of the first things that I tell them is, if I say something off the wall, call me out, let me know, because, at the end of the day, we're creating spaces for them and their healing. And I think, we don't ever want clients to think they have to show up a certain way. The space that we're creating for them is for them to be authentically themselves so that they can start processing and working through and trying to find that healing in what they want.
Come as you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but if you're unsafe, stay away. No, I'm kidding. Bad joke. If come as you are. No, we you're right. We want to meet people where they are in their journey. And definitely, we know that there's obviously, they're not coming here because things are great. They're coming here because things aren't great. So they don't have to tell us. We understand. We get that. Are you accepting new clients?
I am.
Are you opposed? Maybe we should know too, like, not necessarily what you're opposed to, but like, where do you feel you do your best work? What age range you like working with?
I think I'm still learning to kind of gather and figure out where. I know right now I'm serving a lot of kiddos, 5 through kind of 18. So kind of the adolescent in between.
5, like school age 5? Or are you talking about preschool 5?
School age.
So you want them like in school, like they're in kindergarten or something like that. Okay. 5 and up. Yeah. Well, that's great. I've in my own journey, I was 10 and up. Now I've worked with an 8-year-old. Heck, I think I've worked with a 7-year-old before. I just don't find I'm as good. At least I don't feel I'm as good. Maybe the 7-year-old will be like, "Oh, you're great, Mr. Flores," but I don't know. We had Jacoby. I know we've talked about him before.
Mm-hmm.
Jacoby was in a session once with a kid. He wanted to try it. He hadn't worked with littles. Jacoby's in a session with a kid, and his question to the kid is, "So what are your best hopes, little buddy?" And the kid looks at Jacoby and goes, "You talk weird." And Jacoby goes, "Nope, not for me." Like, he's like, "I don't even know how to convert my question into something they can understand." It was one of the funniest things he told us. We just could not stop laughing. We made fun of it all the time, but yeah, that's how we learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so,
I think that's why I like working with littles in between, teens or even some adults that I have, is because they are challenging us. They are, they are learning and seeing the world in a whole other light. And so as clinicians, we have to learn with them and learn how to approach them and how they view the world so that we're able to kind of support them in the work.
This is Ariana, guys. I'm telling you, she's impressive and amazing and has become a phenomenal navigator in her own journey of therapeutic intervention. And we're glad to have you. Thank you for doing the podcast with us. Is this the first podcast you've ever done, actually?
It is. I was super nervous, but yeah, I think, y'all, the listeners will decide whether this was a good one or not, but...
That is true. That is true. They will decide, yes.
Mm-hmm.
That is true.
But no, I appreciate you making the space and, inviting me to do this and take part.
We're glad you made the decision to do that. You're going out of your comfort zone again. And that's how we level up in this world, is stepping out of that comfort zone. And so thank you for doing this. We appreciate it. And so
thank you.
To all you listeners and everyone, we thank you so much for being here, especially those that have just continued to follow us since the beginning. Some of you guys have been with us since the first episode. And boy, I can't tell you, like when y'all have told me or reached out or seen me and said something about it, I mean, we're almost I think we're at a year. So for them to say that, I mean, I'm just like, thank you for validating that this is something that you find helpful, you need, you wanted. And so I want to thank you for those of you that have subscribed to this and been here with us through the whole journey. Really, that's how you're going to probably grow best, is not just picking and choosing which episodes make most sense. This thing links together, and there's a lot of puzzles to unravel about conversations we've had about multiple different aspects that can reach out to you or hit you a different way that helps you in your own journey. And some of those that you were listening, you may never meet us. We may never actually get to see you in person. And we created this podcast so if in the event that did happen, you still had the stuff that we could offer you to help you in your journey. And we wanted to reach more people. That's literally what this was all about. So thank you again for being here. We love you guys. Keep moving forward, and we'll see you next time.